Hello and welcome to this episode of the Parents in PR podcast, a mini-series within Sparks by PRCA. I'm Alex Stevens, founder of Parents in PR and business director at Reuben, Sinclair, and today I'm joined by Zoe Ward-Waring. Zoe is managing director at Sunny Side Up, an award-winning independent B Corp accredited PR agency whose clients include lastminute.com, Charlie Bigham's and Majestic Wine. Unusually for the PR industry, Sunny Side Up is only Zoe's second agency in her 20 years in the industry. At her previous agency, she joined as a graduate trainee and rose up the ranks to be MD in her late 20s and then owner by the age of 30. Zoe went on to sell the agency and joined Sunny Side Up 4 years ago to do it all over again. Outside of work, Zoe is also a mum to two active boys, aged 13 and almost 8. And she's an art lover, Pilates evangelist, and loves a to-do list to manage what's needed to do from both jobs. Zoe, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
No worries. I can totally relate to always having a to-do list on the go. It seems like it's the only way to make sure that everything gets done. But obviously you've been managing the working parent juggle for 13 years now, so you're far more of a pro than I am. But taking you back to those early months and years, how did you manage it then? Was it also a lot of to-do lists, or did you have different coping strategies back then?
Oh my God, yeah. I am known, hopefully affectionately by friends and colleagues to be a bit of a to-do list, and I love pen and paper. I'm still a pen and paper woman. But those early years, two very different experiences, but do have some similarities. With my eldest, I was the owner of my first agency. And I job shared with my ex-business partner, and I'd already covered 2 of her mat leaves. So it was it's not easy, but it was easy because I kind of had a partner who was, helping me keep afloat, keep abreast of things that I needed to. But I appreciate, quite different being a business owner. We'd have check-ins where she would come round and I might be changing a nappy and she'd be telling me X, Y, or Z had happened with a client or with a colleague, and then I would go to monthly board meetings. So yeah, it was quite different. And then with my second, I was an employee because I'd sold my business and had a more traditional mat leave. But my God, yeah, the to-do list and the support network was equally important. And then when I went back to work, I had a staggered return. And those kit days and all the rest of it was, definitely a coping strategy on top of, the to-do list at home and the to-do list at work.
Never ending to-do lists. Yeah, I think that staggered approach is often important, but it's sometimes something that that employers forget about. They focus very much on the maternity or paternity leave, but sort of forget about what happens when you get back. So is that what you did? You did a sort of a staggered return and phased.
Yeah, and in both scenarios. So when I owned the business, obviously in theory that's a bit easier, but I used to have Wednesdays off actually, which is maybe unusual for some. So I'd have kind of 2 days in the office or working full time. Then Wednesdays off to kind of, go back and put my mummy hat back on full time, go to those baby classes and all the lovely things that I'd enjoyed when I had kind of my mat leave. And then I'd have Thursday and Friday. And what I found is that no client or team member had anything so crazy that couldn't wait till the following morning.
Yeah.
It did work. Whereas a Monday wouldn't have worked because, like probably most agencies across the land or in-house, it's your kind of kick off your week, isn't it, etc. And I felt like coming back in on a Tuesday, I would be a day behind everybody else. So again, just something to think about. And Fridays, in theory, whilst a slower day, that also helped by it being my working day because I could finish a week and kind of knew where I was at or where I wasn't, as the case may be, without the high pressure of, Thursday afternoons and into the evening to try and get your week's worth of work all kind of done and dusted. So it worked for me, but equally, it might not work for everybody or everyone's agency or kind of role in-house because when might be seen as a critical day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing that I have seen is that it's such a personal thing what works for everyone, both from an employer's perspective and an employee's perspective, and different childcare needs mean different kind of needs. And another thing that I've learned from my kind of transition from newborn baby to toddler is that there are different kind of parenting challenges at each stage as well. Have you found that also to be true from a working parent perspective? Do the challenges of being a working parent change as your children get older?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. They just, and I'm still learning because, you know, I have a teenager and my youngest at primary school. They just need different things. And it just keeps reminding you. So when they're tiny, you think like that's the hardest bit. And then you get through it and you're like, well, that was easy because they just slept all day. And it's the same thing that as they're getting older, I'm sort of seeing the juggle to have different pressures, like, you know, not wanting to compromise to miss sports day or kind of, you know, the Christmas performance and recorder. That's what I've got coming up. That'll be fun. And homework. So I often say to the team at Sunnyside Up that, you know, I'm logging off at whatever time of an evening because my real job is about to start, and it usually involves some kind of drama over maths homework or science or something with my eldest, or trying to get him to do it. And then my youngest, it's spellings and, you know, fractions and all that fun and games. And as their interests and their hobbies kick in, so the after school football sidelines, rugby, you name it. I mean, the sports schedule, and then you're like, when do I get to go to the gym or do what I want to do? So, you know, that's but it's a small window, and I try and pinch myself sometimes when I'm going to write old moan off. And then the emotional support, which is a whole different ball game, which I'm slowly learning to navigate as the teenager and puberty fun and games kick in again.
There's always something, isn't there? I guess, like I say, it's different challenges for different stages of life. And
that's one of the biggest learnings of being a parent is agility. And I mean, our industry is really good at that because we're trained to react to the unknown. You know, everyone, go back to my to-do list, everyone has a plan of what they're going to do on a Monday morning, and it sometimes gets kiboshed, doesn't it, by something that happens that has to happen instead of the thing that you plan to do. So we're kind of Jedis at that, and you have to kind of remember that PR skill in your parenting world as well, I think.
Which is great that you can, I guess, flex between the two so nicely. You can bring elements of your career into your parenting, and hopefully elements of your parenting style into your career as well, which make you better at both things. But that's really interesting to know. And you know, it's like you say, the agility and the flexibility is huge. On sort of flexibility, I understand that Sunnyside Up offers flexible working for everyone, which I know is typically something that that working parents really value. How do you think that has kind of impacted your ability to manage the juggle? You were talking there about kind of different outside activities that your children are now getting involved in, and obviously your diary is jam-packed. So how does it work there?
So at Sunnyside Up, I think we like to think that we have quite an adult approach. So yes, obviously flexible working for parents, but for everyone, because life is pretty fluid, isn't it? And, you know, there are other things that might need flexibility, but it's all in forward planning, being considerate and conscious of your colleagues, that you don't just disappear and kind of, you know, leave them with a heap of stuff to take on. But for example, we've got one of our team who's training to be a PT. So she has a portfolio career, if you like. That's my son coming home, and he's forgotten the key. Sorry, you have to pause.
Yeah, no worries.
So saying. Yeah, it's applicable to everybody. So for example, we have one of our team who's now trained as a PT and is kind of creating a bit of a portfolio career where she's going to have clients as well as her day job. Good luck to her. And she needs a mid-afternoon session in a couple of weeks. So again, she might start early, log on back later on when she gets back. So it's not about presenteeism, it's about getting the job done. And obviously, you know, aside from if there was a major client event or meeting, then that would kind of have to go out the window. But I think one of the biggest things that I've got, and I'm very grateful for, is that I've got very much an ally in Nick Woods. And I think that's really important to shout out as a male in the industry. because I think sometimes they get a bit of bad press of not being very supportive. I mean, he's the first to be like, show me your pictures from sports day, get there, go, whereas I'm like, oh, I've got to go. It's like, no apology needed.
Yeah.
And we talk about being lead singer and backing singer for each other. So, he equally will need flexibility on things, and it kind of goes without saying. We're like, yeah, sure. So I don't think it's just, I'm quite passionate that it's not just about being a parent, because it could be aging parents that you perhaps need some flexibility for. But I know the subject of this podcast is about that.
No, but it's important.
I mean about adults in the world of work, and COVID changed everything for everybody. Yeah. But I think sometimes there's a lean back to our kind of the old guard, where flexibility and working part-time or working funky hours is kind of being a bit frowned on. And I don't see why. If the job is getting done, who cares?
Absolutely.
Outside of a client demand, of course.
Yeah, there are still restrictions, I suppose. But you're absolutely right. And I think it's really important to note that it does have to be fair across any organization. You can't just offer flexibility for one kind of demographic of employee, because then that causes rifts internally, and the whole kind of point of supportive and trusting environments goes.
I mean, trust, I think, is another thing. When we always say 100% trust, everyone gets it from day one. And, you only don't get it if perhaps you're not worthy of it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like, come on, we're all adults.
Let's
support each other and let's work together. And we are a small business, so everyone's part is key, cogs in a wheel, and therefore, it doesn't matter what your hierarchy is. Everyone's got their part to play, which is why I think we've got this kind of, very strong culture and ethos, parent or not.
Which is fantastic, and it's so nice to hear of a company that everyone knows their role, and that makes things really, really easy in terms of saying, I know when I've done my job, and I know when I can sort of say that I've played my part, and the rest of the team will also know that as well. You've had some incredible professional achievements while raising your two boys, not least of all growing and selling your business. But in modern day society, do you think there's sometimes too much pressure to be firing from all cylinders as a working parent, achieving everything that you can possibly achieve in your career whilst also being the best parent that you possibly can be? Is it too much to expect these days?
Maybe, quite possibly. I mean, I was brought up that everything's possible. So I think it is down to the individual. So I can only sort of, speak for myself. And it is easier said than done. And try not to be too hard on yourself is definitely something that I constantly remind myself, let alone anyone else. Because sometimes 8 out of 10 is actually okay.
Yes.
You might beat yourself up because you're used to delivering 10 out of 10. That was definitely a journey that I went on when, the early days of parenting, where I'd been able to give, in theory, my career everything. And then being able to, manage and navigate that juggle was definitely hard. And I was probably very hard on myself, but then that's part of my personality and DNA. And I'm not going to change, I don't think, at this age either.
Nor should you.
Nor should I. But that's what I mean about it. You've got to be true to yourself, because again, a slightly different perspective being a business owner, because I potentially had a bit of a different perspective, because obviously it was my gig, and therefore, there was a boss, but there wasn't a boss, if you know what I mean. Boss to us as business partners, to each other, working with each other. But I also think there's still a lot of rubbish around working mums versus stay-at-home mums, or dads, the case may be. And no one is better than the other. I know personally, I've got a huge amount of respect to anybody that is doing that stay-at-home mum or dad full-time. I personally couldn't do it. It wouldn't be right for me. And I think that's what I've learned. That's been one of my biggest learnings as a parent, is like, kind of, listen to your guts, and what's right for you is not necessarily right for someone else, but you can't help but compare. That's That just happens.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest danger in actually modern day society is the comparison piece, isn't it? We are so much more aware of what everyone else is doing because of social media, and in the professional world, I guess LinkedIn, it's very obvious what other people are achieving, and so you do tend to kind of compare and contrast. And so I think that's really sound advice to learn what's possible for you and trust your gut and work out what works best for you first and foremost.
And along my career, I've always had a lot of, I've had some amazing business coaching, Cranfield, Henley, that kind of thing, Ashridge. And that was a key part of that sort of training. Being a young MD and then a young business owner, I think definitely helped me when it came to parenting. But I've got, I think, well, maybe not as much energy as I used to have, but I need the brain stimulation. I think it makes me a better parent, better at work, the yin and yang of both. I want that stimulation, but, definitely takes a lot of hard work, grit, graft,
Absolutely.
and a bit of grace. Lots of people that know me will know I always talk about the 3 Gs because I think they've been, you've got to, but I get it wrong as well. Some days don't go quite so well.
No.
Again, that's life, isn't it?
And you can't beat yourself up about that as well. I think that's, like you say, it's really important.
But you will. And I think that's the other thing, you have to accept that you will beat yourself up about it.
Mum guilt is real, right?
Yeah, when it's channeled in the wrong way. But but yeah, it's definitely, you gotta know yourself, be true to your own DNA is what I would say.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm also interested as an employer, your perspective as an employer about how employers can help their employees with that pressure, and whether you actually think it's even their responsibility to help with that, because it might be seen as that actually it's the case that employers are there to help their team members be the best that they can possibly be in their careers, and actually employees should look for other sources of support to manage being a parent at the same time. What are your kind of thoughts on where that line of responsibility kind of sits?
Oh, I think it's about open communication. I mean, I know it sounds a bit obvious, but sometimes, despite being in the communications industry, not everyone's that great at it. So, I mean, we definitely, again, back to Sunny Side Up, and what we do now is we recognize there's various ways anyone can become a parent now. So we just try and keep that same adult, flexible approach to whatever someone's circumstances. So, but we need the individual to also tell us what they need as well. So, for example, one of our team will be going through this journey, and we're doing monthly check-ins and basically kind of, not assuming what was the case last month is the case this. So again, I think it's that agility, dynamism, and again, that probably is the advantage of Sunny Side Up being an independent agency, because it's Nick and I. So we can decide and flex and dare I say the word, but pivot accordingly, as well as the individual. So just keep talking, but I think it's an equal responsibility on the employee and the employer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounding happy clappy about it.
No, it's true. I guess perhaps the onus isn't the employer to kind of create that space where two-way communication is considered normal, and they've got a safe space in which to do that. And then, absolutely, as long as that's created, then it's up to the employee to kind of communicate what they need best. And like you say, that's often quite a personal thing. It's a personalized approach, I suppose.
Yeah, we've got a working mum of 3. And she works part-time, permanent employee, has worked for Nick originally for 4 or 5 years or something. And but her children are, again, they were babies, now growing up into the school sort of more environment, when in theory she's got more flexibility to kind of go from part-time beyond. So it's a change in landscape. So I think it's not assuming that closed door and we've got one policy that fits all. I think that's key to it all, and just keep listening as well as, obviously, at the end of the day, we are in client services. So sometimes it's not always possible to be open and adapt to a situation. But again, it's just going back to being adult and mature about it and explaining why it's a no if it is a no.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. I guess finally, just to kind of end on a bit of a practical note, are there any kind of top tips or pieces of advice that you would give to somebody that might look to you for inspiration as to how to make being a working parent work? Other than all the bits of advice that you have just given, because there's been some amazing nuggets in there.
Find your tribe, both at work and at home. And that's key, because at work you need to make sure you're in the right environment for you as a working parent, and appreciate what you can or can't do, and just keep that honest dialogue as we've just chatted about. And then at home, again, I've been pretty lucky because my husband's been key to me being able to continue my career. But whatever your childcare setup is and whatever you choose, and maybe realize that what works might not work all the time, and have that flexibility again. And other parents that can help with lifts, as I'm discovering as they're getting older, pull in your favors and don't be too proud, which, I'm like, oh God, I couldn't ask that person. They want to help, otherwise they wouldn't help. They wouldn't offer for that help.
So true.
And then secondly, I would say kind of, don't forget yourself. Find your energy or your mojo, wherever that comes from, because it's really easy to forget you amongst all of this and put yourself first. And dig deep on those time management skills that you've been trained in. I mean, like I said, this industry, from a very early start as a grad, I was given kind of, lots of training in organization skills and time management, and that will end up being your superpower as a parent.
Yeah.
So actually, being in PR is really helpful to be.
I love that. That's I think those are two great pieces of advice. Find your tribe and know yourself really well. I think that's amazing. When I asked this question in the podcast, I'm just taking notes for myself, to be honest, and I love both of those pieces. So thank you. And Zoe, thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it. It was such a privilege to chat to you, and some really amazing nuggets of information there. So huge thanks.
No, thanks again for having me.
No worries.